Hey, it's Tommy Colletti. I am here at the Music Zoo today with the great Andy Powers. He is CEO, president, and chief designer at Taylor, all things guitars. So it's, if you would, for at least the Music Zoo audience, could you fill us in on like how it started for you, and maybe even at Taylor, and then we'd get into like how things have grown for you
Right.
and for the company and all this stuff. Like it had to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, and it's actually not all that glamorous of a story. And my dad's a carpenter, still is. He's a great carpenter, and both my parents they're hobbyist musicians. And so when I was a kid, I was around a lot of woodworking. That's what we had. I got my dad's tools. He'd bring scraps of wood home. But I started on piano actually. And that was one of the only instruments I studied formally for a long time. And so that was fun. But my parents they're just recreational players, and they love it. Like, my dad's one of the most enthusiastic music appreciators, right? Play some mandolin, play some dobro, a little lap steel, and all their friends played, and we had a guitar. And so I thought that was like the coolest thing, because, when I was, you're sort of a product of your upbringing, right? Whatever's normal for you is what's normal.
Right.
Right. So my parents' friends, they'd come over on the weekends. They'd be barbecuing, and they were fishermen and other tradesmen, and everybody was they were normal people. And we'd pass guitars around, pass mandolin around. Everybody's playing these songs. I thought, wow, that's like the coolest thing. And I loved the guitar because I liked that it was made of wood. I liked the shape of it. I liked the songs that came out of it. I liked what we did with it because it felt like a shared experience. And so I got really into that, and my parents they're so wonderful to go. My dad brought home a piece of wood. It was a scrap of wood. It was big enough to build a guitar out of. I thought, I'm going to build a guitar. That's cool. I had no idea how to build a guitar. I mean, I was like 7 or 8 years old.
Okay.
I was clueless in every way, shape, and form, right? And my parents were wonderful enough to not tell me no. They go, yeah, sure, try it. So I worked on this thing for weeks and weeks, and it was pathetic. It was like I had 6 mismatched tuners that I begged from a local music shop. I didn't know that you could buy something like frets. I wouldn't have the money for it anyway. So I took nails, cut the head off, cut the point off, figured out a way to get frets in there. I have a used set of guitar strings. Put this thing together, and it exploded into a pile of sticks. I was a kid, right? So I ran inside the house and went, look inside the guitar. Oh, there's all those sticks inside. They must make it strong. They must make this thing stronger. I gotta try again. I think probably because it didn't work, that's what made me do it again.
Sure.
And again, and again, and again. And it turned into this thing. I never thought of it as a job. It was just something that I loved. And so from the time I was a kid on, I was always playing music, playing guitar, building guitars, fixing guitars, restoring guitars, doing that kind of thing.
Right.
So it wasn't until, I was out, getting out of college. I had studied music because I had a scholarship to study. So I did all that. And by the time I realized, well, all my friends are getting jobs, I kind of thought, well, oh man, I can't quit even if I wanted to, because I've got a several year waiting list for new guitars that I owe people. I was working on all these instruments all throughout my teenage years, all into my 20s. But gee, well, my bills are paid. I guess this is almost like a job. I'll just call it a job, And so a lot of things, you recognize it in hindsight.
Yeah.
Oh man, well, I've been at this for a long time already. Good thing I love it. So it kind of went that direction.
That's interesting. The Music Zoo kind of started very similarly. I was teaching guitar, and I loved guitar, and I was playing guitar, and I went from playing guitar and learning at a music school to teaching there, because the guitar teacher was like, you're good enough to teach. Let's do this. And it just kept morphing into something else. And the same thing. I went to school. I went to college. I studied music, interestingly, and then I got out. I was like, I got to get a job. Meanwhile, I had this roster of students, and for me, my students would come to me and go, hey, I need a guitar, and I don't really feel comfortable enough going to a music store, like uneducated. Would you come with me, or would you just go get a guitar? And sometimes I would just go to like the local guitar store and go, I just played XYZ and it was great. Go talk to Joe.
This guy.
Tell him that you know me. He said, put it on the side view, and that's how kind of it started for me too. So
right. Yeah, it is funny to fall into something that way and then realize, oh well, the thing that naturally happened, it could just keep going, and that would be okay. Right. So I partnered up with Bob and Kurt because they had, I worked by myself, like literally like Geppetto in a workshop, and I was really happy with that. And then Bob and Kurt approached me and went, Taylor's unique. Taylor's unique because it's in the hands of the founder still. And we don't want this to turn into a company that's just turning out widgets. We're guitar makers. We're a guitar company making guitars for musicians. We want that to stay our focus for the next generation.
Sure.
If you can partner with us and do what you do, combine that with what we do, a whole lot of people could benefit from that.
Yeah. That
could be really a good thing. So it's not really what I was expecting, but okay, let's go with that.
When did you start there around?
I think it was about 2010 or 11, something like that officially.
Okay.
But it was I don't remember when exactly we started talking about it, because my wife and I were really fortunate. A lot of people liked the guitars I was making. I was doing a lot of arch top guitars and flat top guitars, electric guitars, all kinds of stuff, and I had always maintained a pretty long waiting list.
Right.
And so even when we decided, okay, this is going to be the best thing for everybody, well, I still have a couple of years worth of work I got to get done, so I kind of unplugged my phone and went, okay, I'll just put my head down, I'll chip away at this, and we'll get there eventually.
Influences that you think changed or made what you think a good guitar is, or what makes a good guitar for you? And we talked about this a bit inside, but like, what are some of those like quick things that you
my criteria there? Okay, so I have to look at it at a couple of different levels, right? It's like face value is one level, technical value is another thing.
Sure. My
bottom line measurement, if a musician is enjoying playing the instrument, it's a good instrument. That's my measurement.
Sure.
If you're having fun with the thing, you're making a cool sound out of it, you're having fun playing this thing, yeah, then it's good.
You're good. Yeah. Okay.
And technically, I want fretwork to be perfect. I want straight necks. I want accurate. Like, there's a whole list of criteria. Like, if I don't have fun playing a neck, I don't care what the guitar sounds like.
Right.
Because I don't want to play it. I don't want to touch it. It's not musically useful to me.
Right. And do you base some of the thinking or the way you think about this now from like guitars of your past, or like heroes that you were listening to that like played a certain guitar that made you just think a certain way, or
probably all of them.
Okay.
I mean, I'm a total guitar nerd. Like, I was into electric guitars when I was really young, loved that. My dad always really loved bluegrass music, so my parents would play bluegrass records. I got really into that. I got really into Django Reinhardt and kind of the gypsy jazz, got super into Charlie Christian and kind of that early swing style sort of thing. I kind of into all of it.
Okay.
And so I would listen to these different things and go, well, that's a really interesting influence. That's interesting. And while I was doing that as a player, I was always working on those instruments, because I'd be repairing them, I'd be restoring them for different collectors or museums or whatever, and go, well, this guy played this way because look what he was playing, and this is how it was built, and this is why it was made this way, because of these factors, or this, like I love listening to Mother Maybelle Carter. She's like the first lady of country, right?
Yeah.
She's playing like the same guitar that Eddie Lang would play. You go, really? You play it this way, and you play that brilliant thing out of it? I was like, on an L5 with banjo tuners? Really? That's your gig?
Yeah.
And you listen to those records and go, that's amazing. You know, it's absolutely just fascinating what musicians would do with an instrument.
Right. Yeah. And do you now like, because artists obviously have changed through the years, right? So now do you look at an artist now, like somebody like a current guitar player, and you'd be like, what do you think that they need, as opposed to that person from like the, you know, like the 60s would need? Is it close to the same thing? Is it? And we talked about this inside a little bit, like there's like a really fine line between making something that becomes like a spaceship or it's a guitar.
Right.
And especially us as guitar players, I feel like it's got to be familiar, right? It's got to, pardon the pun, it's got to resonate with you. It can't look too weird because you go, I just don't associate with this thing, even though it makes like, you know, like some kind of quantum physic like sound that like nobody's ever heard before except for mice or whatever. So how do you look at it now? Because you were saying that you talk to players today, like current players, and like what they're looking for.
Well, what a lot of folks are looking for is a musically useful sound. Okay, what is that? Well, technically it's dynamic range, it's pitch accuracy, you know, it's a projection, it's a host of criteria. Okay, those are all pretty easy to quantify. But what more commonly that's masking is they're looking for inspiration. They're looking for a source of inspiration that draws a new sound out of them, that draws their playing in a new direction. It's almost like a continuation of where they've been, right? So you want something that's familiar enough to go, I'm comfortable with this, and yet just unique enough to pull someone forward in where they're going to go next.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I don't want to ever shirk where we've been. Like, I love the classics. I love the traditional sounds. I love the people who are playing in those genres or building in that way. And so I respect that, and I want to carry that with us.
Sure.
While making something that gives you a little fresh dose of something.
Right. Yeah.
Right? That's what keeps this exciting. It's what keeps it fresh.
Yeah.
So you talk to a player who's making records, and you know, when they say, "Yeah, I'll run through my whole rack of guitars. They're all the classics. They're all the modern classics. All these great instruments," and a producer's going, "Yeah, those are all great sounds. What else do you have?" You know, you get to the end of that guitar closet, and they go, "What else?" You know what I mean? True. Right? And so I want to build that instrument that, it's technically good,
right,
and it gives you a little dose of inspiration to just pull you forward into your next
thing. Yeah. That's how, as a guitar player, I always found it like interesting, and to at least you start with your hero and then work backwards on like who influenced them, and then like you have some moments where you're just like, oh wow, I can't believe there's like a complete straight line, and depending on when you were born and what you're listening to at the time, that line you may never see,
right?
You know, and it's always interesting to start connecting stuff together, so like you could actually see the line, and just it almost makes you go, okay, I could do this, because when you just see it, like if you just, we're talking about different guitar players, if you just look at Hendrix without going back, you'll just be like, well, this guy was obviously like just like came from outer space,
right?
And the same thing with somebody like an Eddie Van Halen or whatever. Right. It's just like they just came from nowhere. But when you really start digging in, and that's where the fun happens. Yeah. Right now, like carrying this heavy weight of president and CEO, does that make you now step back and go like, where's the future of Taylor Guitars? Where are we headed? Right. Where are we trying to bring our customer, and don't forget the customer, but what's the vision of music going forward? Because in essence, like as guitar makers and musical instrument makers, you set the precedence of where music's going to go. You know, it's funny, like we were talking about Hendrix before, and like Tone Bender or whatever, right? It was Garrett, and without that pedal, you know, a lot of those sounds wouldn't have been created.
Right.
You know, like I've heard John Mayer even say, like, I bought this pedal and I wrote Gravity and thank you very much. You know,
Right.
like,
It worked out pretty good.
it worked out pretty good for him. You know, so like in essence, these tools are gonna pave the way for like new sounds
Right.
and stuff. So where do you see it going? Like,
I see it as to me, it's a two-way street. Okay, because if you look at the history of instruments and musicians, they influence each other in both directions. Okay, by that I mean a musician might come to a maker and the maker says, okay, I'll build what you're asking for.
right.
A good maker is going to build a little more than what the musician asked for.
Sure.
The musician's going to take that and go, oh, well, now that I have this thing, I could, fill in the blank, whatever
Right.
that thing is.
Yeah.
And then a maker responds and goes, wow, well, if you're going to do that, how about like a famous example, a good reference point. Like since we're talking about Hendrix. Hendrix is not what Leo Fender had in mind when he built a Strat. It's not what he was listening to. It's not what he was into.
Sure.
And because of the unique influence of both of those individuals, that music exists.
Right.
It wouldn't have been the same if something was missing out of that.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, but then you look at, well, what about Buddy Holly? Also appropriately playing a Strat.
Right.
He made all kinds of great songs, great sounds out of this thing, vastly different. And so as a maker, I look at musicians and go, well, I hear what you're making, and what else do you want to make?
Right.
Because there's a lot of things that we don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world, but one thing I'm certain of is that people will continue to write songs and play music.
Have there been any like holy cow moments in the last like 8 or 10 years as far as just like moving forward in the guitar building industry, like something that made you go, wow, this makes a huge difference? Roasted wood, I don't know, like different tone wood,
Right.
or a different angle on the way you set a neck, or anything that just made you go, wow, this makes a huge difference. I didn't even.
One of the big ones for me personally was when I built the first V-Class guitar. Like I had this idea, and I got like halfway through building the very first one and just went, I'm such an idiot. I should have thought of this earlier. Because that for me took a huge step forward in a lot of functional ways for the guitar.
Sure. And
it fit the way that a lot of modern players want to approach the instrument. You're playing along with other instruments. You might be playing with synthesized sounds. You need great pitch accuracy. You want good dynamic range. You want, all these different things. And at the same time, as a builder, I want to be building a bigger variety of guitars. I want a bigger variety of sounds.
Yeah.
And so I was looking for a way to make a great instrument that was familiar to a Taylor player, and at the same time some sort of means to create a wider variety of sounds.
Okay.
I need something that's more controllable. Sure. In the setting, in the way that we build a guitar. I go, well, yeah, I want that, but I also want to go here, and I want to make this flavor and this kind of sound, and I want to take it over here and make all these different sort of iterations. So for me, that was a big step forward.
History's in front of you.
Yeah.
And it's a really great
in front of us.
It's a really great place to be. It's kind of, I would assume, enviable to a lot.
Yeah, we're very fortunate in that way, because we are in a position to say, well, we're free. We have the permission to continue making something different, making something better. If we can think of a better way to do something, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
If I can make an improvement to the guitar, we're free to make that improvement.
Yeah.
We're not beholden to what once was.
Yeah.
And go like, well, that's the high water mark. I can't possibly exceed that.
Sure.
That's not the benchmark. Yeah, the benchmark is, what can I do?
Yeah.
Where is the limit?
It's a great place to be.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't thank you enough for coming here to snowy Farmingdale, Long Island today.
It's my pleasure.